So we saw in that first example that some angles can be difficult to work with. And when we deal with that, what we're kind of working around is the essential property of a triangle that its sum of interior angles is 180 degrees. So if you had some angle like the one in that first case, you can see that winding all the way around, even though we don't have a specific number there, we'd get something much bigger than 180. So we can't really talk about a right triangle in the context of that, because you can't talk about a triangle in that context. So instead, we talk about the other area that gets us up to our value, and that's a construction called a reference angle. There's a bit that can be done with getting specific reference angles for different situations, but what I'll just say here is that when we're talking about reference angles, we're essentially talking about getting back to a more workable axis. So if, say, for example, I'm trying to talk about an angle with measure, let's say 240 degrees, well, you can't make a right triangle out of that, obviously. But what you can do is, in essence, ignore what's going on for this whole region and just focus on this angle down here, which is the completely workable 60 degrees, despite the small print there. But that's the thought, is when we have something that's a bit awkward that you can't quite measure a right triangle in comparison to get those nice relationships that we have, at least to be able to see them clearly, just take the piece that gets you back to the x-axis the fastest. Similarly, if we have some oversized angle that gets us pretty close to the positive x going all the way around, so something like this out to 330 degrees, well, that itself's not great. Obviously, you can't do anything triangular with that angle as it stands. So instead, we'll recognize that we've got 30 left over. And that's what we'll prefer to work with, because it just leads to cleaner relationships. It leads directly into the right triangle stuff that we like to work with, that we prefer to work with. But as I said, this is useful to know, but not something that I'm going to view as vital, so it's not going to appear directly very much on homework or exams. It'll help, but I'm not going to require it, as we've got a lot to cover in our other sections for this week. Which, speaking of, our next one is going to be section 4.5. We're going to be looking at how we can make a graph of the sine and cosine functions. That is, actually see what they look like, drawing them all the way out, especially in terms of some ways that we can adjust them. But that's our next section. See you there.